The photograph arrived 11 hours before Adrian Vale was supposed to marry another woman. I found it at 10:47 p.m., wedged inside a cream envelope that had no business being in the stack of seating charts on my kitchen table. Rain tapped against the fire escape outside my apartment, soft at first, then harder, as if the city had decided subtlety was wasted on me. I had spent 6 years arranging Adrian's life into clean columns: meetings, security windows, private dinners, names he needed to remember and names he preferred to forget. Tonight, my only goal was smaller. Finish the final wedding revisions. Email them before midnight. Sleep for 3 hours. Pretend tomorrow would not change everything. Then I saw my sister's bracelet. It circled the wrist of a young woman standing at the edge of the photograph, half turned away from the camera. The silver chain was unmistakable. One broken blue stone. One missing clasp Emily had repaired with wire because we couldn't afford a jeweler. My fingers went cold. Emily had disappeared 12 years ago. No farewell. No body. Just a police report that slowly became a file nobody returned my calls about. I turned the photograph toward the light. Beside her stood Vanessa Cross, younger but recognizable, one hand resting near Daniel Vale's shoulder. Daniel, Adrian's brother, had died that same year. Vanessa had told me personally she had never met him. I should have called the police. Instead, I called the most dangerous man I knew. "Come alone," I said when Adrian answered. Silence filled the line. Not surprise. Calculation. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Is someone there?" "No." "Then explain why my assistant is ordering me across Manhattan at midnight." I looked again at Emily's wrist. "Because this cannot wait until your wedding." He arrived 18 minutes later. Michael Reed, his security chief, remained in the hallway despite my instruction. Adrian entered without ceremony, rain darkening the shoulders of his black overcoat. He closed the door behind him and glanced once around my apartment: the thrift store lamp, the chipped mug beside my laptop, the sewing kit I had used to repair the hem of tomorrow's dress. For 6 years, I had known which whiskey he served senators and which hospital entrance he used when he wanted privacy. He had never seen where I lived. "You sounded frightened," he said. I was careful. That wasn't my observation. His voice stayed level, but he removed his gloves one finger at a time, the way he did before making a decision no one else could reverse. I slid the photograph across the table. This was inside the archived wedding documents delivered from Daniel's trust. Adrian did not reach for it immediately. "Who opened the package?" "I did." "Who handled it before you?" "The courier." "Record staff." "Possibly Vanessa's wedding coordinator." "Possibly" is not useful. Neither is marrying someone who lied to you. His eyes lifted to mine. The room seemed to contract around that look, but I held it. Adrian could end arguments without raising his voice. I had watched powerful men revise entire positions because he leaned back in a chair. Tonight, he did something unexpected. He sat down. Then he picked up the photograph. Nothing moved in his face at first. Only his thumb, pressing once against the corner beneath Vanessa's image. "She said she never knew Daniel," I said. "I remember what she said." "Then you understand why I called." "I understand that a photograph proves two people occupied the same place for 1 second. And the woman beside them?" His gaze shifted. "Who is she?" I swallowed. Saying Emily's name would make this real in a way the photograph had not. "I need the original envelope," he said. "No." His eyes hardened. "Claire. You can examine it here. This may concern my brother's death. It concerns my sister's disappearance." That stopped him. Not dramatically. Adrian did not perform shock. But his hand loosened around the photograph, and for the first time since he entered, authority gave way to attention. I pointed to the bracelet. Emily wore it every day. He studied the image again, slower now. "You're certain?" "I tied that wire around the clasp myself." Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the buildings. Adrian turned the photograph over. His expression changed. A small change. The kind most people would miss. I had built a career on not missing them. What? I asked. He did not answer. He placed the photograph flat between us and moved his hand away. Written across the back in faded black ink were 9 words. If anything happens to me, find the girl beside Vanessa. The handwriting belonged to Daniel Vale. Adrian stared at the message until the rain became the loudest thing in the room. Then he reached for his phone. "Michael," he said, "lock down every record connected to my brother's trust." He ended the call and looked at me. "Pack a bag." "Absolutely not. Someone placed this in your hands tonight. Which is why I'm staying here until I understand who." "No. Which is why whoever wanted it found now knows where to look." He crossed to the window and checked the street below without touching the curtain. His restraint unsettled me more than anger would have. He did not order men into my apartment. He did not take the evidence. He stood between me and the glass as if that position had already been decided. "You're not moving me like a file on your desk," I said. "Then choose." He faced me. "Come with me willingly, or stay while Michael searches the building and every neighbor watches armed men turn your hallway into a checkpoint." It was not a fair choice. But it was a choice, and Adrian knew the difference mattered to me. I looked at Emily's bracelet in the photograph, then at the locked bedroom door where my real bag sat half-packed from a trip I had cancelled months ago. 10 minutes, I said. "Michael waits outside." Adrian nodded once. No triumph. No argument. While I packed, I heard him moving through the kitchen with quiet efficiency. He photographed the envelope, logged the courier label, and called his records director without mentioning Vanessa's name. When I returned wearing jeans, boots, and my gray coat, he had placed the original photograph inside a clear evidence sleeve from Michael's kit but left it on my table. "You keep it," he said. I stopped. "Why?" "Because you found it. And because if I take it now, you'll spend the next hour deciding whether I intend to bury it." "Do you?" "I haven't decided what it means." His honesty landed harder than reassurance. In the hallway, Michael waited beside the elevator, broad-shouldered and expressionless. Adrian instructed him to search the package route, not my personal history. Another boundary observed without being praised. We rode down in silence. My building smelled of wet concrete and someone's burned dinner. At the lobby doors, Adrian paused. A black sedan idled at the curb, rain sliding over its roof. "The wedding rehearsal starts at 9, I said. "Are you still going?" "Yes." I turned toward him. "After seeing that?" "Canceling it tells whoever sent the photograph that it worked. And proceeding tells Vanessa you still trust her." "No," he said quietly. "It tells her I want to hear what she says before she knows what I know." I hated the logic because it was good. Outside, Michael opened the rear door, but I did not move. "I'm not going to your estate as a prisoner. You'll have your own room, your phone, and access to the records." "And if I decide to leave?" Adrian looked at me for a long moment. "I won't stop you. Your security will." He glanced at Michael. "They won't." The answer cost him something. I saw it in the slight tightening of his jaw. Control was the language he trusted most, and he had just surrendered a sentence of it to a woman standing under a leaking awning. I got into the car. The photograph remained inside my coat, pressed against my ribs. Halfway across town, Michael's phone vibrated. He read the message once, then passed it forward. Adrian's face became still. "What happened?" I asked. He handed me the screen. Daniel's sealed archive had been accessed 23 minutes earlier using credentials registered inside Adrian's private estate. I read the timestamp twice. It matched the minute Adrian had entered my apartment. "Someone knew you were gone," I said. "Yes. Someone close." Adrian looked out at the rain-black city. Close enough to watch me leave. The sedan turned toward the river, carrying us directly toward the house where Vanessa Cross was sleeping before her wedding. In my pocket, the edge of the evidence sleeve cut into my palm. Then Michael spoke from the front seat. There's another issue. Adrian's gaze sharpened. The archive request searched one name only. Michael looked back at me. Emily Bennett. The sedan rolled through the rain without music, conversation, or wasted movement. Manhattan blurred beyond the rain-streaked glass, all reflected lights and unfinished questions. I kept Daniel's photograph inside my coat pocket, my fingers resting against the evidence sleeve as if letting go would somehow erase the only proof Emily had existed in his world. Across from me, Adrian read the security report again. He didn't frown. He didn't curse. He simply absorbed information the way other people breathed. That frightened me more than anger would have. Your estate searched my sister's name, I said. Someone inside my estate did, he corrected. There's a difference. Not to me. He accepted the accusation without defending himself. Fair. That single word unsettled me. I had expected control. I had expected dismissal. Instead, he handed Michael's tablet across the seat. Read everything. I hesitated. Those reports had always been restricted. Even after 6 years working beside him, some files remained above my clearance. You're trusting me? I asked. I'm asking you to find what I might miss. The distinction mattered. I took the tablet. The access log showed Emily Bennett entered into the archive search at exactly 11:19 p.m. The same minute Adrian had been standing in my apartment reading Daniel's handwriting. No files had been opened. Only the search itself. Whoever did it already knew what they were looking for. This wasn't curiosity, I murmured. No, Adrian said quietly. It was confirmation. The car crossed the river, leaving the city lights behind for the darker roads leading toward Adrian's estate. My immediate goal changed. An hour earlier I wanted answers. Now I wanted to know who had known my sister's name before I spoke it aloud. The realization settled heavily in my chest. Someone had been watching long before tonight. Michael's phone rang through the silence. He listened for less than 20 seconds before ending the call. The courier has been located, he said. Alive? Adrian asked. Yes. He insists the envelope wasn't in the shipment when it left record storage. Adrian looked at me. Meaning it was inserted afterward. By someone with access to the wedding files, I said. Or someone with access to me. Neither possibility offered comfort. We entered the estate through iron gates that opened without slowing the car. I had visited this property hundreds of times for meetings, charity dinners, strategy sessions, and holiday events. Tonight it felt unfamiliar. The house glowed warmly against the storm, preparing to host a wedding that suddenly seemed built on unstable ground. Adrian stepped out first but didn't reach for my door. He waited instead, giving me space to decide whether to follow. It was a small courtesy. Deliberate enough that I noticed it. Inside, only a skeleton overnight staff remained. He instructed everyone to continue exactly as planned. No whispered alarms. No locked corridors. No public signs that anything had changed. If the person behind this is watching, he said softly as we crossed the marble foyer, panic gives them information. I nodded despite myself. It was the same lesson I had watched him apply during corporate crises, now turned inward against his own life. Michael disappeared toward the security office. Adrian led me to the private archive instead of the guest wing. Shelves lined the room from floor to ceiling, every document catalogued with impossible precision. He unlocked one cabinet and stepped back. Everything connected to Daniel is here. You're leaving me alone. You asked not to be treated like a prisoner. He paused. I listened. He walked out, closing the door without locking it. I stared after him for a moment before pulling on cotton gloves from the archive table. If I was going to prove Emily mattered, I had to stop thinking like an assistant and start thinking like someone searching for a missing sister. I began with the transfer ledger instead of Daniel's personal files. Routine paperwork. The kind everyone ignored. 15 minutes later, one line stopped me cold. An evidence envelope had been checked out from Daniel's archive 6 months earlier under an authorization signature I recognized instantly. Vanessa Cross. Vanessa Cross's signature stared back at me with calm, practiced confidence. 6 months ago. Long before the photograph had found its way into my apartment. My pulse thudded in my ears as I checked the ledger again, hoping exhaustion had distorted the ink. It hadn't. One evidence envelope. Checked out. Returned the same day. No description. No explanation. Just a neat signature beneath a line that should have remained untouched. I snapped a photo with my phone before closing the ledger exactly where I'd found it. If I confronted Adrian now, instinct would take over before evidence did. I needed one more piece. The archive smelled faintly of old paper and cedar shelves. I moved to the return log, comparing dates, initials, inventory numbers. Every transfer surrounding Daniel's files had been recorded with obsessive precision except that single envelope. Someone had deliberately left the description blank. A quiet knock interrupted my concentration. Adrian remained outside the open doorway. "You've been in here 23 minutes, he said. "You counted?" Michael did. I held up the ledger instead of answering. "Before you ask Vanessa a single question, look at this." He stepped beside me without taking the book from my hands. His eyes scanned the page once. His expression never changed, but the silence stretched long enough for me to understand he recognized the signature immediately. "You were going to confront her tonight," I said. "Not anymore." I looked at him. "Because of this?" "Because you've given me a reason to wait." It was the first major decision I'd ever watched him change because of something I found instead of something he already believed. He closed the ledger carefully and returned it to the shelf himself. Nothing dramatic. Nothing broken. Just discipline replacing impulse. "Michael," he called into the hallway. The security chief appeared almost instantly. "No one questions Miss Cross tonight. Double the document security." Quietly. Michael nodded once. No discussion. No hesitation. Orders traveled through Adrian's world like gravity. Nobody rushed because they trusted everyone else would move. Watching it from inside instead of across a conference table felt strangely intimate. Adrian turned back toward me. "You were right." The words were simple, almost reluctant. "About what?" "Evidence first. Conclusions later." Before I could answer, Michael's phone vibrated. He listened briefly, then covered the microphone. "Sir, housekeeping reported someone entered Miss Bennett's apartment after we left." Every muscle in my body tightened. "Was anything taken?" I asked. "No," Michael replied. According to the responding officers, almost nothing was disturbed. Almost. Adrian looked at me instead of Michael. "What did you leave behind?" I searched my memory. Laptop. Coffee mug. Sewing kit. Wedding schedules. Then my stomach dropped. The framed photograph. Of? Emily and me. Adrian didn't speak. He didn't need to. Whoever entered my apartment hadn't been searching for valuables. They had been verifying a face. Michael ended the call and spoke again. "There's one more detail." The intruder ignored electronics and cash. My mouth went dry. "What did they touch?" Michael glanced at his screen. The frame was moved. I closed my eyes for one impossible second, seeing the tiny apartment exactly as I'd left it. The picture had stood beside the window for years. If someone moved only that frame, they hadn't come looking for Emily's name anymore. They had come looking for Emily's face. Adrian rested one hand lightly against the archive table, thinking rather than reacting. "Claire." I opened my eyes. From this moment forward, stop assuming your sister disappeared because of what she witnessed. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. Start asking whether someone has been searching for her ever since. Before I could process that possibility, Michael's tablet chimed again with a priority alert. A facial recognition system connected to the estate's historical records had completed an automated match. The woman standing beside Vanessa in Daniel's photograph had not been identified as Emily Bennett. She had been identified as someone using another name entirely. The name on Michael's tablet meant nothing to me. The feeling it left behind meant everything. I stared at the unfamiliar identity attached to the woman I had believed was Emily until the letters blurred together. The system is wrong, I said, more firmly than I felt. It compares faces, not lives. Adrian didn't argue. He looked at the image once, then lowered the tablet. It compares records that someone chose to preserve. My sister didn't become someone else. Maybe not by choice. That possibility settled over the archive like dust, invisible until the light caught it. I drew a slow breath and reached for the evidence sleeve inside my coat. The photograph stays with me. I said it would. Even if it hurts your investigation? Trust isn't useful only when it's convenient. His answer arrived without hesitation. It wasn't kindness. It was discipline. Somehow that carried more weight. I slipped the photograph back into my pocket. Then I want to see the original records behind that facial match. Adrian glanced toward Michael. No filters. No summaries. Michael nodded once and disappeared down the hallway. 10 minutes later, we stood inside a compact records room beside the archive. The file Michael produced wasn't thick. Just a passport application, 2 customs entries, and a charity guest list from more than a decade ago. The face matched the woman in Daniel's photograph. The name did not. Neither did the birth date. I studied each page carefully until one detail stopped me. This signature. Adrian leaned closer. What about it? It's inconsistent. I pointed at the passport form, then the guest registry. Same name. Different handwriting. Someone practiced the signature, but they never matched the pressure. Adrian remained silent long enough that I wondered if I'd overreached. Then he looked toward Michael. Run every document filed under this identity through handwriting comparison. Michael accepted the instruction without question. Adrian could have dismissed my observation as speculation. Instead, he shifted an entire line of inquiry because of it. I realized then that influence inside his world wasn't measured by who spoke the loudest. It belonged to whoever brought the strongest evidence. We returned to the corridor just as one of the overnight staff approached with quiet urgency. Miss Cross is asking whether you've retired for the evening, sir. Adrian's expression stayed composed. Tell her I'm reviewing tomorrow's security arrangements. The staff member left immediately. No one asked for proof. No one pressed for details. I watched the exchange disappear into the rhythm of a household built on discretion instead of panic. You could question her now, I said after the footsteps faded. I could. Why won't you? He rested one hand against the back of a chair. Because if she's innocent, I warn the person who isn't. If she's guilty, I tell her exactly where my attention has shifted. I hated admitting it, but the restraint made sense. The mystery no longer felt centered on Vanessa alone. It was widening around everyone connected to Daniel's final months. Michael returned carrying a slim storage envelope sealed with faded evidence tape. Handwriting analysis has been submitted, he said. But we found something else. He offered the envelope to Adrian, who examined the custody label before handing it directly to me. Open it. Inside lay a single hotel key card wrapped in aging paper. Across the paper, in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 words. Not the witness. Find who protected her. I looked up sharply. The photograph, the false identity, the search for Emily, every assumption I'd made shifted at once. I had been searching for the missing woman. Daniel had been pointing towards someone standing beside her all along. Daniel had not been asking Adrian to find Emily. He had been asking him to find the person who kept her alive. The distinction changed everything. I turned the hotel key card over in my hand. Its magnetic strip was scratched, the corners softened by years inside an evidence envelope. A room number had been written beneath Daniel's message, then crossed out so violently the paper had nearly torn. "This came from the envelope Vanessa checked out," I said. Michael checked the custody code. Same inventory number. The earlier ledger entry clicked into place. 6 months ago, Vanessa had removed this evidence, returned the envelope, and left no description of what it contained. That was no longer a suspicious omission. It was an action. "She knew about the protector," I said. Adrian's gaze stayed on the card. "Or she was trying to learn who it was." "You're still protecting the possibility that she's innocent." "I'm protecting the investigation from what I want to believe." The words held no defense, only effort. I understood then what restraint cost him. Power had trained Adrian to move first and force the world to explain itself afterward. Tonight, he was choosing uncertainty because I had asked him to respect evidence. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made my next decision harder. "The hotel may still have archived records," I said. Michael shook his head. "Not under a room number this old." Then use the card itself. Vendor code, issue sequence, magnetic format. Someone supplied it. Adrian looked at me. "You know how to trace that?" "No. But your people do." "My people will also know we're investigating Daniel." "Then don't use your people." Silence followed. Not empty silence. Resistance. His organization was built on controlled channels, known loyalties, consequences he could measure. I was asking him to step outside all three. "The records office where I worked before you hired me kept legacy hotel contracts," I continued. "I still know the indexing system. Claire, your apartment was entered less than 2 hours ago. Which means my former life is already gone whether I leave this house or not." Saying it aloud hurt more than I expected. My apartment. My routines. The illusion that Emily's disappearance belonged to a closed chapter one could visit only when I chose. Someone had crossed that boundary for me. Adrian studied my face, and for once he did not offer protection as an order. "What are you proposing?" "I access the old vendor database remotely. You keep your network out of it. If the card identifies the hotel, we follow the paper trail before whoever searched Emily's name can erase it." Michael objected immediately. "Remote access creates exposure. So does waiting. And if they trace you?" "They already have." Adrian's jaw tightened. He looked toward the dark window, then back at the key card. I could see the decision forming and breaking apart behind his eyes. Finally, he removed his phone and called the wedding coordinator. "Postpone tomorrow's rehearsal," he said. No explanation. No apology. He ended the call before the response could become a negotiation. The choice landed in the room with more force than shouting. "You just told whoever is watching that something changed," I said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you were right about one thing." He met my eyes. "We can't investigate this while pretending tomorrow is normal." It was the first visible fracture in the future he had planned. Not the wedding itself. Not yet. But the machinery around it had stopped. Because of the photograph. Because of Daniel. Because I had refused to let him contain the truth. Michael prepared an isolated laptop in the records room. I signed into the retired vendor portal using an old authentication key I had never bothered to delete. The system opened slowly, each page loading like it resented being disturbed. I entered the card's manufacturer code, then the partial room sequence. One result appeared. The Bellwether Hotel, closed 11 years ago after a fire damaged its east wing. My breath caught. "Daniel died 3 days after that fire," Adrian said. I opened the archived incident index. Most files had been removed, but one insurance attachment remained. It listed a private emergency relocation requested for a female guest under the false name from Michael's facial match. The request had been approved by Daniel Vale. Beneath his authorization sat a second signature. Not Vanessa's. Not Emily's. I recognized it anyway. Michael Reed. The room went completely still. Michael did not reach for the laptop. He did not deny the handwriting. Adrian turned toward the man who had stood beside him for most of his adult life. "Tell me why my brother trusted you with Claire's sister," he said. Michael's face changed, not with fear, but with the exhaustion of someone who had known this question would come eventually. "Because Daniel believed you would choose revenge over her survival," he answered. Adrian went rigid. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The person protecting Emily had not been hidden outside Adrian's world. He had been standing inside it all along. Michael looked at me next. "And if you open the rest of that file," he said quietly, "you won't be able to go back to believing your sister simply disappeared." Michael's warning should have made me stop. Instead, I opened the rest of the file. The first page was an emergency transfer order signed by Daniel. The second was a medical intake record under Emily's false name. The third was a surveillance summary. No body. No death certificate. Just dates, locations, and one sentence that hollowed me out from the inside. Subject relocated voluntarily after refusing contact with family. I read it twice. Then a third time, because grief had trained me to distrust mercy when it arrived too late. Voluntarily? My voice barely carried. Michael looked at the floor. Adrian did not. "Explain it," he said. The command was quiet, but the room tightened around it. Michael folded his hands behind his back, the posture of a man accepting judgment. Emily witnessed Daniel meeting Vanessa at the bellwether. She believed Vanessa's family was using the wedding alliance to gain access to Vale financial routes. Daniel tried to get her out before anyone knew she had seen them. "And you helped him," I said. "Yes." "Then why didn't she come home?" Michael's eyes met mine. "Because Daniel told her someone close to Adrian had already leaked her name." My gaze shifted to Adrian before I could stop it. He looked stricken for less than a second, then controlled it. That brief failure hurt more than denial. "Who?" he asked. Daniel never confirmed it. "But you suspected me." "I suspected what grief would make you do if you believed Claire's sister had information about your brother's death." Adrian stepped away from the table. He did not threaten Michael. He did something worse. He listened. Michael continued. "Daniel thought you would tear through every person connected to the leak. Emily would become leverage. So we moved her before the fire, buried the identity, and told no one." "Including me," I said. "Including you." The answer struck with unbearable simplicity. 12 years of searching. 12 years of wondering whether Emily had been cold, hurt, afraid. All while someone in Adrian's world had known she walked away alive. My hand closed around the edge of the laptop. "You let me work here for 6 years." Michael's face tightened. "I didn't know who you were when Adrian hired you." "And when you found out?" He hesitated. That hesitation was the betrayal. 3 years ago. The room went silent. I looked at Adrian. "Did you know?" "No." "Did you ever ask why Michael started reviewing my background again?" His eyes sharpened. "I never authorized a second review. But your system did it. Your house searched Emily tonight. Your fiancé handled Daniel's evidence. Your security chief knew my sister survived." My voice broke despite everything I did to hold it steady. "And you brought me here telling me I could trust the process." Adrian took one step toward me, then stopped when I raised my hand. The restraint should have mattered. It did not matter enough. "Claire, I gave you access because I wanted the truth. You gave me access to a world designed to decide what truth I was allowed to survive." He absorbed that without defense. "You're right." I hated him for saying it. I hated Michael for lowering his eyes. Most of all, I hated the part of me that still believed Adrian's admission was real. Staying meant trusting men who had turned my sister's life into a protected file. Leaving meant abandoning the first evidence that Emily had chosen anything at all. The cost existed in both directions. I removed the photograph from my coat and placed it beside the laptop. You told me I could leave. You can. Then prove it. Adrian glanced toward Michael. Clear the gates. No escort unless she requests one. Michael nodded, but I was already pulling the isolated laptop toward me. I'm taking copies of every record tied to Emily. Adrian's expression changed. Those files contain protected identities. So did my sister. We held each other's gaze across the table. This was not about permission anymore. It was about whether his respect survived when it cost him control. After a long moment, he reached into his pocket, removed the archive key, and set it beside the computer. Take what belongs to your search, he said. Nothing unrelated. It was a boundary, not an order. I accepted it. I copied the files, photographed the custody logs, and sealed Daniel's note inside the evidence sleeve. When I finished, I looked at Michael. Did Emily ever contact you again? Once. Adrian went still. So did I. When? 7 years ago. What did she say? Michael's face carried the weight of a promise he had kept too long. She asked whether Adrian had discovered who betrayed Daniel. I waited. And what did you tell her? No, the answer landed like a door closing. I picked up the drive and moved toward the exit. Adrian did not follow. Claire, he said. I stopped without turning. If Emily stayed hidden because she believed the traitor was still inside my life, leaving alone may be exactly what that person expects. Then find the traitor, I said. Not for me. Because you should have done it 12 years ago. I walked out of the records room carrying the proof that my sister had survived, and the certainty that every person I trusted had built their loyalty on a silence that cost me half my life. The estate gates opened before I reached them. No guards blocked my path. No one called my name. Adrian had kept his word, and somehow that made leaving harder. Dawn had begun to bleach the sky into pale gray, washing the night of its shadows without making anything clearer. I sat inside my car with the copied files beside me and the photograph resting on the passenger seat. For 6 years I had believed I worked for the most controlled man in New York. Tonight I learned that control could hide ignorance as easily as guilt. I started the engine, then shut it off again. Running felt honest. It also felt exactly like whoever had protected the truth for 12 years expected me to do. My phone vibrated. One message. No number. If you want your sister to stay alive, stop looking. There was no threat against me. Only against Emily. My thumb hovered over the screen before I forwarded the message to Michael without adding a single word. If someone inside Adrian's world was watching me, I wanted them to know I would not carry secrets alone anymore. I drove toward my office instead of my apartment. There was nothing waiting for me there except an overturned picture frame and the certainty that strangers already knew where I lived. The building was still dark when I let myself inside. My old desk sat exactly as I had left it before the wedding preparations consumed every hour of my life. I opened the copied files again, searching not for names but for patterns. Every relocation record used the same approval format except Emily's. Daniel's signature appeared on every page. Michael's appeared on the transfer order. One line, buried inside a logistics receipt, finally caught my attention. Emergency transportation authorized by AV. My breath caught. Adrian's initials. The authorization date was 12 years old. Long before he hired me. Long before I knew him. For one impossible moment I thought Michael had lied. Then I looked closer. The initials weren't signatures. They were destination codes. Alder Valley Safe House. Not Adrian Vale. I almost laughed from relief before the realization settled into something colder. Someone wanted those initials to be misunderstood. My phone rang before I could photograph the page. Adrian. I considered letting it ring out. Instead, I answered without speaking. Don't go home, he said immediately. His voice was steady, but something underneath it had changed. Fatigue. Regret. Maybe both. Too late. Where are you? Working. Claire. He stopped himself. No order followed. Only a measured breath. Michael traced the anonymous message before you forwarded it. And? It originated from inside the wedding venue. I closed my eyes. The ceremony was only hours away. Whoever had sent the warning had done it while guests, planners, florists, and security moved freely through the same building. Hidden in plain sight. Cancel the wedding, I said. Silence answered me. Not resistance. Pain. I can't, he said at last. Not yet. The words landed exactly where they shouldn't have. Then everything you've said tonight was just another version of waiting. No. His voice sharpened for the first time. If I cancel now, the person behind this disappears before we know why Daniel hid Emily. And if you don't? They believe they're still winning. I looked at the logistics receipt again. Alder Valley. Not Adrian. A misunderstanding planted so carefully it had survived 12 years. How many others had survived with it? There's something else, Adrian said quietly. I found a file Daniel kept outside the archive. I waited. It proves Michael wasn't protecting Emily from me. My grip tightened around the phone. Then who? I don't know yet. He didn't pretend certainty. He didn't ask me to trust him. That honesty hurt because I wanted a reason not to believe him anymore. Before I could answer, movement reflected across the dark office window behind my desk. Someone stood in the hallway outside. They didn't knock. They slid a cream-colored envelope beneath the door and walked away before I reached it. By the time I pulled the door open, the corridor was empty. I picked up the envelope with unsteady hands. My name was written across the front in handwriting I had spent 12 years trying not to forget. Emily Bennett. My hands trembled only once before I opened the envelope. Inside lay a single folded sheet and a hotel receipt yellowed by time. The handwriting belonged to Emily. I knew every uneven curve of her letters before I read the first sentence. Claire, if you're reading this, Daniel failed to keep his promise. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. There was no dramatic confession. No desperate plea. Just the quiet honesty that had always sounded like my sister. She wrote that Daniel had hidden her because she had witnessed a meeting that was never supposed to happen. Vanessa had not been Daniel's partner. She had been trying to warn him that someone inside Adrian's own organization intended to use the coming marriage alliance to seize control after Daniel was gone. Daniel believed he could expose the traitor first. He was wrong. The hotel receipt matched the crossed-out room number from the evidence envelope. Emily had checked into the bellwether under the false identity Michael protected. She left before the fire. Daniel never did. Every clue fell into place without erasing the pain that carried it there. Vanessa had lied about knowing Daniel because telling the truth would have exposed Emily's survival. Michael had hidden Emily because Daniel ordered him to protect the witness instead of chasing revenge. The search for Emily's name inside the estate had not begun with Adrian. Someone else had continued it for 12 years, waiting for one mistake. My phone rang again. Adrian. This time I answered immediately. I know why Daniel hid her, I said before he spoke. So do I. His voice sounded older than it had a few hours earlier. Claire, listen carefully. The wedding isn't the objective. I looked down at Emily's letter. Neither was she. No. A pause. The objective was always me. I closed my eyes. Daniel had not feared that Adrian would become the traitor. He had feared that grief would blind him long enough for the real one to inherit everything Daniel died protecting. The wedding was never just a marriage. It was the final transfer of trust. Vanessa was never the architect, I whispered. She was part of Daniel's plan. She agreed to stay close because leaving would expose Emily. Adrian exhaled slowly. She lied to me to keep a promise to my brother. Everything I believed about her shifted at once. Not innocence. Not guilt. Sacrifice. Before I could answer, another message appeared on my screen. This one came from Michael. Security breach. Ceremony moved forward 30 minutes. Decision required now. I looked through the office window toward the waking city. If Adrian stopped the wedding before the guests arrived, the person Daniel had hunted would disappear again. If the ceremony continued, that person would finally believe every obstacle had been removed. Claire, Adrian said quietly, I won't ask you to trust me. I folded Emily's letter and slipped it inside my coat beside Daniel's photograph. 2 promises. 2 people who had chosen silence for reasons that finally made sense. Good, I replied. Because I'm not choosing trust. I picked up my keys and walked toward the door. I'm choosing evidence. Where are you going? To your wedding. When I ended the call, the fear was still there, but it no longer decided what I would do. For the first time in 12 years, Emily's voice had pointed me forward instead of backward. Whatever happened next would cost someone the future they had spent years preparing to steal. The wedding had already begun when I reached the estate. Music drifted through the open doors, elegant enough to make betrayal sound ceremonial. I entered through the service corridor, Emily's letter inside my coat and Daniel's photograph pressed against it. Adrian stood at the far end of the ballroom beside Vanessa, both of them facing an altar neither intended to reach. Michael waited near the security station, watching every entrance except mine. That was when I understood. He had traced the warning because he had sent it. He had moved the ceremony forward because he controlled the breach. He had protected Emily 12 years ago, not from loyalty, but because Daniel's witness was more useful hidden than dead. I crossed the room before fear could slow me. Michael saw me too late. Stop the ceremony, I said. The music faltered. Every face turned, but Adrian looked only at me. I placed Daniel's photograph on the signing table, then laid the bellwether receipt beside it. Michael authorized Emily's relocation, I said. He also searched her name tonight, entered my apartment, and sent the warning from this venue. Michael's expression remained composed. You're frightened and drawing conclusions. No. I'm comparing systems. I pointed to the custody code on the photograph's evidence sleeve. You prepared this sleeve in my apartment. The archive search used the same internal formatting sequence, one assigned only to security transfers. You didn't discover the search. You created it. His eyes shifted toward Adrian. That single movement was enough. Michael reached inside his jacket, but Adrian moved first, not with violence, but consequence. Stand down, he said. The security team surrounding the room lowered their hands from their weapons and turned toward Michael. His power had always lived in obedience. Now Adrian used it to prevent bloodshed instead of demand it. Michael's face finally cracked. Daniel would have destroyed everything. So you destroyed him first, Vanessa said. Her voice shook, but she remained beside me. Michael looked toward the exits. None opened for him. Adrian removed his family ring, the symbol required to complete the alliance, and placed it on the table beside Daniel's photograph. There will be no transfer of authority today. The wedding guests stirred. Years of influence, alliances, and protection shifted beneath that sentence. Adrian had chosen the truth knowing it might cost him the empire built in Daniel's absence. Michael surrendered only when Adrian ordered every record released to independent investigators, beyond veil control. No private judgment. No hidden punishment. Evidence would decide what power once concealed. After the room emptied, Adrian handed me the archive key. You decide what happens to Emily's files. not permission. Ownership returned. I gave Vanessa the photograph long enough for her to say goodbye to Daniel, then placed it with Emily's letter in a new envelope bearing both their names. Adrian did not ask me to stay. He cancelled the marriage, surrendered control of the investigation, and walked away from the altar alone. I followed because, for the first time, following him was not obedience. Outside, morning light broke across the wet stone steps. He had ruled by making others fear his choices. That day, he became worthy of mine.